Essentially, I'm going to talk about three things. I'm going to try and stick with a theme of three items. It's been known to help people to retain things. The first thing I'm going to talk about is, and I guess I want to qualify a couple things. One is I am pleased to have Tim Moody in the crowd with me today. Tim is our CEO of Pan Global. I'd also like to extend a big thank you to VRIC, which I only really know as Georgia. Georgia's a very warm-hearted person, and I really enjoy working with her. So the first thing that I'm going to talk about is because I've geared my presentation towards a retail investor and not a geologist, I'd also like to give a small caveat that I'm not a geologist. I'm fortunate to be good friends with some very good geologists like Ross McElroy from Fission and Tim Moody from Pan Global and Doug Kerwin from Real Gold, just to name a few. Another wonderful, warm gentleman that's in the hall today is Ron Nedlinski. Ron and I are actually doing some work in Saskatchewan right now. I'm probably missing a few geologists, but one thing I noticed today, which I don't know why it didn't dawn on me before, but the geologists are really quiet and very nice. I don't know if anybody's ever noticed that, and I think it's because they know everything. And the only way that you really get to know everything is by keeping your mouth shut. And most of them are very good listeners and very warm people. So I know it's just an observation I made today. So I actually felt quite comfortable knowing that I'm not a geologist and I'm not going to pretend to be one. So you will come to our booth after this presentation because Pan Global is an amazing story. Deeply rooted in Pan Global is the true essence of the geology, which has been brought to light by a gentleman by the name of Tim Moody. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to tell you basically where we're at in terms of the resource world from my point of view. And we all know how cheap it is. Secondly, why copper makes sense. And in fact, why all minerals make sense. I'm going to draw on a couple masters for this. One would be obviously Robert Friedland, who's talked about copper, and a couple famous quotes. One is that you're going to need a telescope to see the price. And this is real stuff. So I'm going to talk a little bit about why you need to be paying attention to copper. And then by far, the third thing that I'm going to talk about, and also probably one of the most important things, is how do you actually invest in a junior resource stock? This is absolutely important, and this relates to another theme that I'm going to discuss today, is something called a triple dip. This doesn't happen that often in terms of a retail investor's life, where you're going to be able to take advantage of the cheap resource markets, you're going to be able to take advantage of the higher demand for copper, and you're going to be able to take advantage of a world-class company called Pan Global. And it doesn't just have to be Pan Global. I'm going to actually show you the 3 Ps, if you will, of picking a resource stock. And this is it's not a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, but it doesn't happen that often. You can find a good project, you can find but you have to find the right management team, and you have to find the right project, and you have to buy it at the right price if you're actually going to make money. If you mess up any one of those, you're not going to make money. So let's start with the first slide. Essentially, resource stocks are at an all-time low. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on geology. I'll probably spend most of my time, 3-4 minutes, on choosing the right people and the three Ps, which essentially are the people, the project, and the price. So those are the 3 things we're going to talk about: how cheap the markets are, the interesting facts about copper and all metals, and the need to pick a right company. So we know that resource sector is at all-time lows by all measures. The next slide shows you from a relative value, commodities versus the S&P. This isn't my favorite slide, but it's a pretty good one. But the next one is my favorite. This one really shows how cheap commodities are relative. Now I say relative to the index. I am not making a statement about if Coca-Cola or Pepsi or Walt Disney or the things that make up the Dow Jones. What I'm saying is that the commodities on a relative basis have never been cheaper. So where's the risk? To me, the risk of the markets is a chance for a permanent loss of your capital. And I think what we've been seeing over the last 5 to 10 years is people chasing the Dow. And I'm not saying that they're necessarily overvalued, but on a relative basis, it's never been cheaper to buy commodities. And you don't have to I mean, all you have to do is buy the index. But what I'm suggesting, that's only the first dip. How about the second dip and how about the third dip? So first of all, if you don't know how to pick stocks and you don't have proper advice, and it's not in the context of a properly structured portfolio, you better be very careful. And there's some great newsletter writers. There's all kinds of people. I don't provide investment advice, but there's lots of people that know what they're doing. And you need to know what you're doing. If you're going to venture into the junior resource market and you're going to handpick an individual company, you better know what you're doing. So first of all, you know you're getting cheap markets. The second thing is that copper demand, as according to Robert Friedland, is going to be psychedelic. I think that's a pretty interesting word. I don't know if anybody's sort of watched the career of Robert Friedland, but I have. It's sort of like being an investor in the Dow and not watching Warren Buffett. I think if you're going to be a resource investor, shouldn't you watch one of the masters? One of the things that I'm going to conclude is that we have another master in the room. His name is Tim Moody. Surprise, surprise. And that's why you're going to come to the booth. Because when you want geology questions and you want to understand what makes Spain more attractive than most jurisdictions in the world, it's not in some far-flung place, you're going to take a hard look at Spain, you're going to take a hard look at Pan Global. I'm trying to do what Robert says, get your wallet to hand-to-wallet reflex going, but so basically he says copper demand is going to be psychedelic. What he means is you're going to need a telescope. So what is going on? Why is he so bullish on base metals? Well, there's 8 billion people in the world. We're adding 85 million a year. And the reality is we need all these base metals to live. Everything you touch, everything you look at, everything you see, everything that's around you comes out of the earth. Now, copper just happens to be one of the most attractive ones. There's zinc, there's uranium. We like all the metals. The one that I find extremely attractive is tin. Although I'm not a geologist, so I was talking to another very well-known guy, Richard Hyde. Richard's an amazing individual that took a company by the name of West African Minerals from $5 or $6 million of market cap to $300 million. Kind of a guy that you want to meet. Stumbled into him. I haven't seen him for a couple of years, and you can bet I'm going to go for coffee with him tomorrow. So copper demand is going to be psychedelic. I don't know if anybody knows the history of Robert Friedland. I'm not going to go into that in my talk because it's a whole other topic, but it's quite an interesting story. I thought this was an interesting little sidebar so we can also have a little fun as we go along. This is an agreement bearing the signatures of both Steve Jobs and Robert Friedland. I'm sure Robert Friedland knows this. There is a first page to this, but nobody really knows definitively what agreement they signed. I think it actually had something to do with real estate, but maybe it was a subdoc for a private placement, but I don't know if it was in Apple or if it was in Ivanhoe Mines. But this is a real document that they signed, and somebody actually bought this at an auction for $40,000. I think they should have bought Apple stock or Ivanhoe myself, but somebody actually paid $40,000 because their two signatures were on there. And it sort of brings the question to my mind is, what were these guys doing? What insight? What were they doing when they built Apple, when they built Ivanhoe Mines? Well, in my view, Steve Jobs had sort of recognized the true nature of what these cell phones are all about, the connectivity between two people, the connectivity between the world. What Robert Friedland has really done is discovered metals in the earth, as he calls it, this ball of iron that's flowing around the world. He's had the insight to look below the surface in countries that people weren't looking and discovered 11 properties with I think the total value is like $1 trillion. If you want to see what Friedland's all about, just ask Doug Kerwin. Doug Kerwin, another quiet geologist that knows way more than I do. And when you're around Doug, the best thing to do is keep your mouth shut and let him talk about geology. But what happens in this world that I live in is that the salesmen never shut up. So the geologists sit and listen. I think that's why they're all so quiet and nice. Anyway, that's just my theory. So what was Steve Jobs and Robert Friedland doing? They were slowly meditating their way to riches. Steve Jobs did it through Apple, and Robert Friedland did it through Ivanhoe Mines. What a lot of people don't realize is that they also both lived on a commune and did a lot of acid. And that's not a joke, that's an actual true story. So the other thing I think that you want to do is when you're looking, if we look at what Friedland's really saying, is that you cannot advance this world without the materials. So I'm not saying that you shouldn't chase the Dow. I'm not saying you shouldn't own a pot stock. I'm not saying you shouldn't do all those other things. I talked to a farmer that came to our booth today, and by the way, we have Hershey Kisses at our booth. The last 3 Ps is how to catch a winner. One quick slide here which talks about the 3 Ps. This is a good pal of mine that caught a big fish in Saskatchewan. So the 3 Ps are the people, the project, and the price. So the real secret to resource investing, of course, is the people. There's the management team of Pan Global, and there's our portfolio in Spain, the Escacina project, and the Iberian Pie Belt. So with that, I invite you to the booth, and if you have any questions, we'll be around at the booth. Thank you.